We're in session 2 of 2 for the Takeoff R10 product. And as Jim mentioned, my name is, again, Lad Nelson with Carlson Software. And coming to you from today is the gray skies in Iowa. But we are going to be focusing on the design aspects of Carlson Takeoff Suite related to bringing in some of the design PDFs into our project site, doing some match line creation, creating up some selection sets, and joining nearest for our proposed sites, getting some surface models built, and then doing ultimately some volumes and some reports. So this is going to be the extent here of my PowerPoint. So let's get right into the product. But before I do, however, what I do want to do is quickly provide, for the sake of the recording here, what we'll be working on. And today we've got basically 3 sheets for our design. And for the first part of the presentation that we did on Tuesday, we had 40 scale plan sheets that were rotated basically due north. Today we've got 1 to 20 inch sheets that are not rotated in due north. And between each of the 3 sheets that we're going to be looking at today, you'll notice that there is a little bit of overlap between, for example, some of the sheets where we don't actually have a good clean break. So one of the exercises today will be to create match lines so that as we assemble these sheets together, we can avoid some of the duplicated data that's found between each of these sheets. And the same goes over here on the eastern portion of this sheet. So if you can see a little bit of the detention pond that's over here, again, you can see how it's replicated with some of the areas that are being highlighted on this particular sheet. So this will be the pond drawing that I'll create here in just a little bit. This will be the east drawing that I'll create, and this will ultimately be the west drawing. So with those sheets in mind, what we're going to do then is get started actually inside of Takeoff R10. So I've got the software hopefully here ready to go. And before I actually get started with the importing of the PDF, what I want to do is a little bit of housekeeping from the presentation from this past Tuesday. So to get started, what I'm going to do is first open up the base drawing that we had been working on, because one of the things that was sort of slowing me down a little bit this past Tuesday was the amount of hatch material that was in this actual PDF. And I sort of showed some tips and tricks for the Takeoff Suite products found inside of the IntelliCAD engine. And one of the things that I want to do is get rid of the hatch entities that are found inside of this particular drawing. And the IntelliCAD engine does provide a nice filtering mechanism to get rid of the hatch entities. And I'm going to utilize the drawing cleanup tool found inside of Takeoff OEM. And to do that, I'm just going to go to the Takeoff menu, choose Drawing Cleanup, and we have a lot of different options in here to sort of get rid of things that we typically call quote-unquote bad CAD, some things that are common that sometimes engineers will convey to contractors if they're not careful. But what I'm going to do is clear off this whole great big list and just simply indicate that I want to erase hatch entities out of this particular drawing. So with this single toggle turned on, I'm just going to go ahead and choose the OK option and let the drawing cleanup go through. And in this case, it's going to remove just a little over 100,000 entities from the drawing. So that will take and clean up a lot of the underlying bulk, if you will, of the drawing. So I don't have to worry about longer regen times and things like that. So with that drawing now effectively more cleaned up than it was before, I'm going to go ahead and save the drawing. The next thing I want to take a brief look at, then I'll go ahead and close down my base drawing, was the other part of this that I want to take a look at is, and we'll go ahead and open up the OTC drawing that I had started, which was the semblance of the contours that we had inserted, was the concept of the the topsoil strip, and that was one of the areas, that was one of the topics from this past Tuesday that I didn't really talk about. So if I go ahead and choose the thaw on all layers command, here's all the data that we had in the drawing, and we had created a boundary polygon, and we had also created then we brought in the area that was going to be the demolition polygon that was drawn in from Google Earth, for example. And maybe in this particular case, what I want to do is to choose that I want to do a strip, a topsoil strip for the entire area. Now I can choose pretty much any polygons. If I want to draw in a boundary just around the property polyline boundary in here, I can do that. For the sake of a quick demonstration of the topsoil strip routine inside of Takeoff, I'll just presume that this boundary, as I've drawn it in, will be the topsoil strip limits for the sake of the exercise. So with that, I'm going to go into the Takeoff menu, and underneath my topsoil removal menu group, the first thing I want to do is choose the define topsoil depths. And I have two different ways to determine what my topsoil depths and should be. The first way is to choose if I want to just enter an arbitrary depth, like 6 inches, for example, or if I should remove a top strata. So if I have Takeoff OEM, which is the all-encompassing Takeoff product, which includes the ability to do trenching, but it also includes the ability to do soil boring, so that we have the drill hole menu up in here. I could actually go out and locate drill hole locations throughout the site and indicate where I might have different depths and thicknesses of topsoil material, and then through the drill hole menus establish where the different thicknesses will generate maybe not necessarily uniform thicknesses of topsoil throughout the overall site. And with the removal of the top strata menu turned on, for example, I can have it say, well, maybe there's 3 inches up here, 6 inches there, 4 inches down here, and have it, do an interpolation of that topsoil thickness throughout the overall site based on where those drill holes have been placed. For the sake of the exercise today, I'm going to simply say, nope, for the overall removal depth, maybe in this case, let's use 0.33 feet for about 4 inches, let's say. And any place that I want to do a replacement depth, maybe we just want to replace maybe up to a quarter of a foot, for example. And I can apply the swell and shrink factors in here. And if I want to determine what the density of the topsoil is, I can put that in there as well. So with that, those topsoil depths defined, I'll go ahead and choose OK. And then I will indicate the limits of where my topsoil will be stripped from. And I can do that underneath the topsoil menu. And I will say, let's identify the topsoil removal polylines. And I can say, again, we're going to choose the defined option. So I'll just press enter for the default. And I will pick up the 2 polygons in here. And also I will use that this one is also a contributing polyline, which was the demolition area. And since those 2 are in here, Takeoff uses an island-based logic to establish where the topsoil should be removed from. And because this existing road bed is going to be demolished, there shouldn't be any topsoil in here to remove, very little anyway. And as a result, what we'll do then is take a look at the topsoil removal replacement. And here now we can say, let's hatch the topsoil removal area. We'll just use the default hatch pattern for right now just to sort of see where that is. And you can see right now, this would be all of the area where the topsoil would be stripped from. So it gives us a visual indication then, are we stripping topsoil in the appropriate areas? We are. And we can now then remove that remove that erased topsoil hatch, which we can. And then underneath here, we can say now let's also identify any topsoil replacement polylines if we had that. So I don't have those defined right now, but then if I had other areas where I have like little parking lot islands where I need to place topsoil back in, maybe around the detention pond, I would just indicate where my topsoil needs to be replaced, and then Takeoff will account for the topsoil thicknesses that where, to get down to eventually the unclassified material to establish, again, what will be the unclassified dirt versus the replacement thicknesses to get me my ultimate earthwork volumes. So it's a very simple matter of establishing, again, those topsoil removal and replacement polygon areas. It's all island and logic based, so it makes it very easy to determine visually about where those regions should be occurring. So that was just a little bit of the housekeeping that I wanted to take care of before I got started. So now we're going to get into then the focus, which will be the design sheets. And because we have so much material to cover, I'm going to actually skip through or not show you everything today. We're going to do a little bit of the concepts, and then some of this will be what I call through the magic of television moments, where we'll say, here's what ultimately what this will look like when it's all said and done. So I'm going to go ahead and save the OTC drawing, and we'll go ahead and move into then the next part of this phase of the project, which will be to start up the importing of the design part of the project. So with this, I'm going to go ahead and do a File New, and I want to create again a brand new site. And the name of the drawing that I want to create, in this case, might be C-West for the west part of my design, civil. And this was also on a 20 scale drawing. And like we said earlier, this was state plane in Missouri Central. We'll choose next. And again, same data path, and for coordinate files for stakeout purposes, that's all the same as from before. And what I'm going to do then is, like we did earlier, is reference in the underlying general base plan. So I'm going to come back down to XREF, and we will go to the XREF manager and add in the base plan. We can use the same 0, 0, 0 coordinates and uniform scale. Everything's good there. We'll just say OK. And this should reference in much quicker now because we don't have all that inefficient hatch in there. And when we do a zoom extends routine in here now, extends, there we go, it loads right in much quicker now. And with that base plan loaded, now what we want to do is add in the first of my 3 sheets. And we'll go straight to the toolbar here to do that. And I'll go into the 2.0 PDF. And we'll load it up and just insert the line work for that first design sheet. And with that one being brought in, again, we'll locate it nearby this base plan. So we'll just pick it, location, rotation angle again of 0, specify a default scale, probably 20, and we'll place that sheet into the drawing. And when that comes in now, we'll notice that, again, it has a sheet position that is properly positioned as it would have been placed or plotted on the sheet, but that is not at all rotated like it is towards this regular plan. But what we will do then is take that ultimate sheet, and when it's stitched together with the other 2 plans, is orient it with the plan, or the drawing, excuse me, the building on the reference plan over here. So there's our first sheet coming in. All right. And I will go ahead and go into my X reference right now for just a moment. And this is where my DOS skills will usually come in here. And I like to detach this one because I don't need it right now. So just simply detach it, because I'd like to retach things later on. That way I don't have to worry about zoom extends and things like that. I'm going to go ahead and, again, just for the sake, since we do have lots of little hatch patterns in here, I'm going to go back underneath my drawing cleanup, and we will get rid of all that hatch entity information out of there. Again, just helps for regen time, so there's 73,000 objects that have been removed out of that drawing. And we'll go ahead and save this drawing. just to help with keeping things nice and clean. And ultimately what we're going to want to do then is establish a match line up through this site somewhere, so that when we clip this drawing out with the one that's going to be the east side of this particular site, that they form a nice, easy, clean line. Now, a question was posed to me, well, why didn't I just bring in the next PDF and bring it in right to the side and work on them side by side in the drawing? Well, and the reason is that for me, and everybody's different, I like to keep things sort of separate and then bring them together once I have them sort of cleaned up. Because when I have multiple drawings all together in one overall drawing, I might run into areas where I need to, if I get things all together in one drawing, sometimes I have to figure out who's what. If I have layers that need to be turned on and off, for me, I feel I have better control when things are separate. Again, there's not a right or wrong answer here. This is just a matter of preference. So the intent of this particular message is do what you feel is right for you. Again, I don't have to sit here and claim that I have all the answers. This is just what I find sometimes works for me. Sometimes I might run a different approach. But in this particular example, I'll show you one way that I happen to feel worked for me on this particular example. So I've got this particular drawing. We'll save it again just so that we have the most current definition here. And we'll create up a brand new drawing. And this one will be the east drawing. And again, we will create up a C-east here. And with this, we will also create a 20 scale drawing and choose next. And with that, I will go ahead and reference in the west plan drawing. So again, if you get to know your key-ins, you can get to those a lot quicker than simply going through the menus. So I'll go ahead and open that up. And there, that one is attached. And we'll zoom extents here. There it is. And I will go ahead now and bring in that next PDF for the 2.1 drawing. There we go. And so we'll read that one up and bring that one in. And as that one comes in, we'll put it now next to it a little bit. And let's say we'll put it in right about here, rotation angle 0, which is fine, and a scale of 20 again. And again, just to sort of reiterate on a topic that I had mentioned for the previous presentation on Tuesday, one of the things that I do always like to do, and I haven't done it, sort of me getting into bad habits here, is always check the distance of bar scales, because sometimes PDFs might have been replotted into different size sheet sizes. So as you are bringing those PDFs in, I would always encourage you to double check things, because invariably I've seen it happen is, clients will have been given a B size plot, for example, that might have been exaggerated up to a D size or vice versa. So I would always encourage good practice to make sure that you are getting something that is, is the proper dimensions, and make sure it's been scaled then appropriately to the size as indicated by the bar scale. So I'm going to go ahead and again, back on Takeoff, we will go ahead and rerun that drawing cleanup again and get rid of all those hatch entities. So there's about 67,000 out of there. And what I like to do now is we'll just simply move all these entities in here down just a little bit closer, just so that they're in the ballpark of where I think I need to be. And for the sake of today's recording, what I want to do then is find a common point between these two drawings, so that as I develop my match line, I can see how these 2 points are common between these two portions of the plans. And the goal will be then to draw a polygon up through this site, so that when I eventually clip out the parts of the drawings that I don't want or don't need, that they will match up very nicely. So here's how we're going to do this. I'm going to go ahead and save out of my drawing. And I'm going to go back to the west drawing. And I am going to draw. First off, I'll create a brand new layer in here. And easiest way for me to do that is just to go into the layer command. I'll say make and C-match, for example, MTCH. We'll give it a color of red, and there's my new layer. And one of the things that I will do then is say draw 2D polyline, and it's going to draw it onto that, maybe that current layer. Doesn't really matter either way, I could do it. But I'll say OK, and I can just pick a point, let's say right here, off my site somewhere. And I'm going to go very precisely now to, and this is where it gets a little tricky in here because you can see I've got a couple different endpoints all going on. I'm going to go right to the tip of that arrow right there, that intersection point right there. And at this point then I want to go, doesn't really matter, up through maybe right there. And I will track over to here and close that figure up. So yesterday's presentation, I drew this going the other direction. It doesn't really matter which way you go. But in this case, now I've got that first match line built or drawn. And what I want to do then is erase everything that's outside of that polygon boundary. So I'm going to go to Edit and then Erase. And I'm going to say Erase by Close Polyline. And I'm going to pick on this perimeter polyline. And with all these options turned on, I'm going to say Erase Outside. And I've got the Auto Select Entities to Clip turned on, and I'll choose OK. So it's going to go through then and clip out all those entities. I think I have a couple little ellipse entities in here, so we'll just go ahead and erase those things out manually. And there is those entities then trimmed up to my boundary. I then also want to use this match line polygon in my other drawing. So I'm going to make a quick block of this polygon boundary drawing, and I can do that underneath my draw menu. I can say let's do a right block, and I will select the objects. I'll just pick this one block right here, and the base insertion point will be the precise location that I wanted, which was the endpoint right there. And I've got an endpoint snap set up here of that red line. And I'm going to go up to a different folder location here where I want. And let's go up to the OTC folder, and I will call this my C-MTCH1 block. And I can retain the entity in here, or I can convert it to a block or delete it from the drawing, whatever I want to do. I'm just going to retain it that's in here. I'm just going to say OK. And that's been removed out now, or excuse me, it's been written out. Then I'll go ahead and save my drawing here. I always like to do that. And let's go ahead and take a look now at the east drawing. And if I want to, I can do an XREF. And let's go ahead and reload this drawing. And now we've got an updated definition of that drawing in here. So you can sort of see what it looks like. And I'm going to go ahead and now insert. And actually what I'm going to do here, I can actually detach this. Now I can see actually what we've got here. So I'm going to detach it. But I'm going to insert that match line into my drawing. So if I go to Draw and then Insert, let's see, where am I at here? Draw, Insert, missing it. There it is, Insert Drawing. I need to go out to my Browse menu then and go to my C-Match1 drawing, choose Open. And in this case, I want to specify on screen, and I'm not going to explode it just yet, just to make sure I'm good where I need to be. And I'll say OK. And there's my block. And I want to insert it again right where I need to be, which will be at the end point of, and I'll go right to where I need to be, right there. Actually, looks like I need to go to the intersection of right there. So there's where I need to be. So now I'm happy. And then I'm going to explode this guy. And we'll explode it back to a polyline. And now it's just a matter of saying, okay, let's go ahead and issue the edit and erase by close polyline now. And I pick this close polyline. And now we're going to say erase inside. We'll just choose OK. And we'll get rid of those things. And we'll erase out the couple of guys that I have my stranded ones left over. And I'm good to go. So with those things now removed, I can go ahead and save my drawing. And I would repeat this for, oopsie, let me go ahead and undo that. And I would also then do that same operation for the pond and get rid of all the other stuff in here that I don't need, need to see. And once I've done that, I'll go ahead and save this. Then it's a matter of bringing the drawings together. So in this case, maybe I'd want to bring the east drawing into the west drawing. And to do that, I would, again, just go back underneath the draw and insert drawing command. And in this case, I can go out and browse for, let's just say, the east drawing. And since they have a very common coordinate system now based on 0, 0, 0, I'm not going to explode them right at this moment in time. I'll do that in here in just a moment, make sure everything's good. I'm going to say OK, because they are sort of relative to one another. There they are. They're sort of close. And now what I want to do is get them sort of moved over to one another. Doesn't really matter at this point who goes to who. But I'm going to say let's move maybe this first block based on the endpoint here. So that's where I need to get very precise on this. So if I do an apostrophe zoom window here, let's get in real close. Oopsie. Move. Got too far into it. There we go. And let's do an endpoint. Intersection actually is what my snap needs to be. Right there. And we go back over to now this point over here. There we go. And let's get to the endpoint of my red line. They should match right up, and they are good to go. Okay. So there we are. And now we have the ability to explode this block. And we can do that very easily. Just do a quick explode. And we pick up that object, and we're off to the races. So that's sort of the process then of clipping these things into desired match line shapes and bringing them together. And once I'm done with that, through the magic of television, as I mentioned earlier, I'll go ahead and save this here real quick. The end result will be something that looks like this. We'll go ahead and choose open, and we'll go out to a different folder here. And it looks very similar to, for those of you who are brand new to today's presentation here, the end game will be something that looks a lot like this. So I've gone through then in this particular example and brought in each of the different examples of the 3 different sheets, and using the 2D align command, I aligned the building footprint using the coordinates that we had established, and that was more the same from the coordinate geometry to the building from the base plan, and got them all aligned. Now, the one thing that I didn't talk about here today is that in this particular example drawing, I've actually gone ahead and utilized the elevate multiple in series command and re-elevated now the design contours to the proper elevation for the sake of creating design surface models. And for those of you that were on Tuesday's presentation, that was, again, just utilizing the command underneath assign contour elevations multiple in series. The one problem that we had, however, was when these contours came in, they needed to be joined together. Quickly demonstrate that. So back over here, we have contours that came in little individual segments. So, excuse me. So to show that, let me go ahead and say View and Isolate Layers, and I'll pick up maybe that layer, and let's see, this is a 1335. Let's say that layer. So again, as I take a look, this contour only extends up through about right here. This contour is just that one little segment. So to elevate each of these things would take quite a bit of time as the contours stand right now. So to get around the fact that all these things are disjointed, you can see here that let's stop just a little bit. There's a little bit of a gap in this case between these two contours. So what I want to do is bring them together, and we have a routine for that underneath Edit, and we can say Join Nearest. So for Join Nearest, then what I want to do is say, okay, I want to join a gap, and we can pick up that gap and say maybe from there to there, let's see what that gap distance is. That was about 4/100ths. So maybe I can broaden that out to maybe make it 1/10, for example. And if things don't match up by more than 1/10, don't join them up. And if they happen to miss one another by that 1/10, let's just go ahead and average those endpoints together. And in this case, let's join across the intersections, but I'm not too concerned right now about whether or not there are identical widths or on identical layers, or whether or not they have identical elevations. In this case, they should all be done at elevation 0. But because a lot of these lines, and in a lot of cases, don't have common layers, this selection set of common toggles in here might come back and bite me a little bit. So I'm going to turn a lot of these things off and say OK. And when I come back out and say all entities in here, even though I don't have the pound turned into this project right now, I'll just say OK. It will go through then and read up all these entities and join them up in here now. And now when I take a look at this contour, you can see how it now does actually snake through, and it's continuous. Same thing here. This contour keeps on going through, and same thing with this one. So now when I do my assigning of contour elevations, multiple in series, I have much fewer contours that I have to pick through. So the Join Nearest is a big time saver when it comes to getting your work done, and can really make short work of getting all this data figured out. So, and again, for the sake of today's recording, then, again, just for getting these things elevated, to sort of show that all we did was say elevate, again, assign contours and elevations, multiple in series. In this case, all we need to do is say I want to go to the C- topo layer configurations, and I'll say OK, and raise up the lines, in this case starting up at 1335, going in this case uphill. And now, for the sake of today's recording, one of the questions that was raised in the earlier sessions was, well, how do I, once I run the command, how do I get back to the layer commands? Because sometimes when I'm rerunning this, I don't have the ability to specify the layering options. A common question that I get is, well, I want to rechange the layers. Maybe I'm going from survey into design now. Just press on the rerun of the command, press your S for settings command to reestablish the layer dialog box, and that will let you reset that. So that's a very common question that a lot of times we will get in the technical support group. So with that being done, we've got our contours elevated, at least in this particular case, 2 of them have been, but we'll switch back now into the design drawing. And these have been elevated and placed onto layers that have been given different colors for visualization purposes. So let's go ahead then and take a look. The other thing I should also mention is that not everything has to be elevated to be used for subgrade adjustments. So as an example, when I was first presenting this data to the client in question, he'd indicated that he wanted a 5-foot basically offset around the building perimeter. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at what we've got in here. And let me find the area in question. It's right around this area here. So I'm going to go to View and Isolate Layers. And I'll pick up this triangle, maybe that green polygon, and that green guy right there. So when this building was being provided to us, one of the things that he said was, I want a 5-foot offset around the shape of the building. Like, okay, we can handle that. But that was a sort of a very interesting shaped building, and I didn't want to have to redraw it all by hand. So to draw this building outline, we use the shrink wrap entities command to do it. But because there are entities that are already on the layer of these other triangles that were determining the building walls, what I had to do was create small little selection sets of the triangles that were in here, being careful not to select other triangles and the hatch stipple patterns that were in here. So to do that, my focus yesterday was to try and utilize a fence selection method, which didn't really work out the way I had really wanted. It did, but I felt I could do a better job. But through my statement today, one of the things that I wanted to do was take a look back at my my drawing inspector. So if I go back to my drawing inspector here, if I take a look at this green polyline, right now it's on the C building outline layer and it's down at elevation 0. Also, the green 5-foot offset is on a C building overhead layer, that's what I call it, and it's currently at the desired elevation. So when we go to make a surface model, we're going to utilize the elevation here, but we will perform the subgrade adjustments accounting for the, say, 8 inches of concrete, of the concrete slab, and maybe underneath the aggregate base for this building shape right here. So that's an important distinction inside of Takeoff. Not everything that contributes to the surface model has to be elevated. This will be the thing that contributes to the surface model, but this will be the thing that contributes to the subgrade adjustment. It's sort of an interesting concept. So just something to keep in mind as you're working through your data sets. This is a very fascinating aspect of working through Takeoff. So getting back to, let me go ahead and freeze off then the 2 polygons that I've drawn in here. So I'm gonna go back to View and we'll say freeze layer by pick, and I'll pick off that guy and pick off the green one and figure out how we want to draw this in. So for me, the goal will be, well, how do I get the polygon drawn in there? I'm going to go into Draw, and then I will say, let's do a shrink wrap entities. And maybe I want to say, let's just do a select in here. And how about V building outline 2 as an example, and I'll say OK. And let's do bounded line work only. So rather than doing across gaps, I'm going to say just do me anything that's based on bounded line work. I'll say OK. And what I'm going to do then is come in and say, all right, let's give me, in this case, I can start doing selection sets in here, and what I want to try and do is get it where I am. Yesterday my goal was not to do all these crossing clicks in here, but this was actually probably the nicest, cleanest way I could find to get it. With the real challenge was getting down into some of these areas right in here. And as I come through this, one of the things I ultimately over-selected here on this part of this site. So that's okay. We can come back and we can remove that stuff later by getting what we want and then removing out the things that we don't want. And as I come through this, it takes just a couple of seconds to do, and that's all right. You know, because ultimately, if I don't have to sit there and trace through all this stuff, and I'm getting a very precise boundary, then I can remove without too much effort the things that I don't need. So I'm going to go back to this guy. Here we go, and then I can just do a quick little selection there and there, and then we're just about done. And with these, then you can just do a crossing there, and there, and there. And I think I'm just about finished. So there it is, and looks like I got one more there. Okay, and then so there it all is, and I'm going to then hit R for remove, and I'll remove off the things that I over selected. So that should be about my boundary, and I'll press enter, and it looks like I got I'll say yes to remove, and yes, there we go. So I don't know if I got that all, and then let's take a look at my layer list in here, and let's go into the color here. So on my layer list, let's see if we can see it here, pick it up, and for my boundary, let's change that up to maybe a deeper blue, and we'll say okay, and choose okay. Did I get that guy in there? Let's double check. There it is. Yep, so I've got my polyline in there, and so there it is, and in C building outline 2. And so that guy's been drawn in here now, and let's go ahead and double check on it. So if I go ahead and list, there's my C building outline 2. It's all down at elevation 0. All right. So that was one quick way to get that all built in there for me. All right. So then it was just a matter of saying, okay, let's go ahead and offset that by 5 feet. And we just say edit, and we just do a standard offset of, and we could actually say in this case for offset, we could say offset to layer. And that's all I did there was I said, let's just do, C-BLDG, maybe overhead HD 2. And let's do an offset amount of 5 feet as an example. And I can say okay, and go out there and pick up that and just move it over there. So that's how I did that. And then from there, we just elevate it, and we're good to go. So by indicating, and then from there it says, okay, now what we have to do is say elevate, and we can say set polyline to elevation. And the elevation in this case, based on the number here on the screen, is 1340.83. And we pick up this object, and we're good to go. So now that guy is set, and we can then put those into our layer material target subgrades. Now, as we're working through this, one of the other things that I don't know if I really made clear, effectively clear on Tuesday's presentation was the utilization of the edit assign polyline elevations routine. So as I go back and say now underneath view and then thaw on all layers, let's go ahead and do all that real quick. There we go. We had looked at briefly assigning the ditch polygons that were coming up here through the abandoned road bed by the contours that were running up through here. You can see that some of these curb islands have points that are being called out for based on the labels in here. So as I go through, each of these have been assigned a particular elevation based on a label. So as I track along in here, you can see how the grades for each of these islands have been established to the C parking curb back layer, and the elevations as I track along will vary. And I've used a combination of both the design contours and the spot elevations to establish what those grades should be. To do that, I first came through and used the elevate 2D to 3D by polyline or 2D to 3D polyline by screen entities command. Sort of like what we showed you for the break lines for that abandoned roadway. We got the 2D polylines elevated to the polylines. This is one source of data. Then I could also follow that up with the edit assign polyline elevations routine. And when I run this, this allows me to choose a polyline, for example. And in here then, I can track specific spots on a polyline. And if I click this spot here right there, it takes me to vertex number 11, and I can choose the desired elevation. In this case, I set it to 1337.67, and that value can be hand entered right there. And every spot on that polyline can be picked up and specified. And as I indicate the position, whatever it is, anything that's marked in red will become what we call a control point or a fixed point. And then everything else in blue will be linearly interpreted along the way. And as a result, then, I have the ability to establish, okay, so like this, I think there was an example yesterday in our presentation. So 52 was linearly interpolated from there up to the next one, and that generates actually a little bit of an error here, because that should be, in this case, probably 1337. So let's just go ahead and manually fix that, get rid of that little anomaly. So we'll manually correct that problem. And probably the same thing here at this spot right there, whatever that guy needs to be. So let's make that also 1337. I think that's the contour elevation. And let's double check that. Yes, that is 1337. So we've just fixed up that two little issues that was resulting in the problem that I was having yesterday. So the edit assign contour elevations routine gives me that pinpoint control for getting things elevated exactly as the engineer had intended on my plan sets. And when I choose OK, now that thing, oops, now I have a problem here. So I'm going to say OK, and I'm going to say yes, let's go ahead and save my changes in here. So there's my one little Persian issue from my flaw here today. So let's go ahead and restart this up and take a peek here and see what happens. So we try to do too much at one time. Let's say OK. And let's go back and regroup and see what happened. So I'm going to go back in here then, and unfortunately we didn't have that problem yesterday. It's OK. And go into...
First time in 4 days.
Yeah, I know. It's unbelievable. So I'm going to go back in here now, and let's see here. Where was I? I was into open, and who was I in? I was in design. There we go. So there he is, and so I'm back in the game. So like I said, I haven't lost too much in here. So what I would want to do then is I can just come back in and let's say elevate, edit assign polyline elevations, and let's just go ahead and fix up that guy one more time. Let's see what he was. I think that was the right one I was on. Doesn't really matter. And let's pick up where I was. Is it right there? Close. Oh, there it is. It was 1337. Okay. So anyways, looks like it must have either grabbed it or saved it. So it's been in there, and let's take a peek.
I think you grabbed the contour there, lad.
Oh, did I? You're right. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's cancel out of this guy, and let's pick up the different command, edit line PZ here, and I want the yellow guy. Thank you for that reality check. And this is the guy that I want. Yes, you're right.
Your elevations were just way too good.
way too easy. Yes. Sometimes I get myself a little mixed up there. So, oopsie. And I want to pick up this guy, and there we go. So let me regroup and pick up this guy and set him back to where he needs to be. So just like I said, I'm not fixing a lot of elevation difference here, just enough. So there we go. So anyway, the point is that edit assign polyline elevations gives me, like I said, that nice control that I can get back into. And like I mentioned earlier, I do love my favorite command, save. So once I'm done with my my editing and my modifications, then what I want to do is I want to restore north because what I've been working on here now is a rotated view. It doesn't really matter in this case. This was all done through what we call the rotate twist screen routine. So underneath twist screen for view, we had the line polyliner text. And I had told the software to make the sheet border due east. Well, in this case, I want to restore due north. So you can see north is still north on my CAD plans, but I'm just going to say go ahead and restore due north. I want to see what this looks like for my grid north. This is what the site should look like overall, but I was just making it easy for me to read all the numbers on here so that as I was going through and doing my work, I didn't have to sit there and twist my head and see what all those numbers look like. That just made it easy for me to do my work. And again, to get back to where I was, if I needed more work to do, I could just say view, and again, twist screen by line polyliner text, and just pick on maybe this eastern edge of that line, and set that line to be 290 degrees, then I'm right back to where I was. So again, another handy little routine that we provide you that lets you do your work without having, again, to make life challenging as you're working through these particular plan sets. So with all that done, I'm going to go back to my view, and you don't have to do this for making your models, but in this case I will. And what I want to do next is get everything all put in because we have some materials in here that I want to go through. And so in this case, I've got the C design layers that I'm going to move over to the design. So one of the reasons I do like the National CAD Standards Layering Convention, so I'm going to say move these over to design. Maybe I have the rest of these are all colors from the PDF. I've got, let's see, I probably need to get my existing brought in here from before, so let's go ahead and do that. I've got the, and then so I've got the design, I've got all these rest ones that are in here for other, so I'm going to go ahead and save these. Let's bring in that existing drawing real quick. And so I'll just go ahead and run the insert command. And let's go out and browse for the survey existing, open it up, and choose OK. And we can explode that to be good to go. And that should overlay in there just where it needs to be, which it does.
And we are getting
again,
close to
back
time
underneath my takeoff. Yep, we should be good to go here
just
pretty quick. So under my survey, we've got the break line major minor. We'll move the, moves to existing. And then the last thing I want to do is we'll save up these targets. I want to redraw my my boundary for my design purposes. So we're just about done here, and we'll have volumes and models built here momentarily. So with my targets built, let's just go ahead and turn off the existing, and let's turn off the other. Boundary polyline, or just do shrink wrap entities, excuse me. And this time, let's just make a C-BND boundary. I can actually just type it in probably a lot quicker, BNDY. Type it in, there we go. And we'll just do a cross gap since we do have gaps in this boundary polyline here. And we will do a maybe a medium heat level. And we'll choose OK. And we'll put a boundary around all this data. With that boundary drawn in, I'm going to say takeoff. Set the boundary polyline. We will pick up that boundary polyline right there. And we will now make existing, which will be done. So we're going to gather up all the entities. We had a few little, again, minor little errors that are just outside of the site, which is okay, not too worried about it. I'm going to go ahead and choose then Takeoff and make design. Again, we'll gather up all the design data from the layers that are on the drawing. That's all done. And again, might have a few little errors in here based on where some of these are. These are off by 500ths and 400ths and 8,000ths, so I'm not too worried about that. I do have one vertical edge right along in here, which is, again, something I probably would want to fix. For the sake of today's presentation, I'm not going to worry about it. Again, where some of these contours cross over, I'm not going to get too hung up about it today. Normally, I would want to go through and fix these errors up. But for the sake of today's presentation, I'm going to leave those alone. And then what I want to do then is go ahead and take a quick view of my design surface. So I'm going to say underneath View, we're going to go into the 3D views. We'll look at the Design Surface 3D Viewer. We will see then the, we haven't done our subgrade adjustments, so let's go ahead and do that real quick. So underneath my Define Layer Materials Target Subgrades, for my building outline, let's adjust for concrete by 8 inches. And make sure I get that proper depth. And let's just say it's $100, for example, per, let's say, square yard. Let's see, area square yard, there we go. And maybe it's 135 pounds per cubic foot there. And let's also account for aggregate. And let's do 8 inches of aggregate there, and maybe that's $75 a ton, let's just say. And maybe that is, I don't know, maybe it's 100, excuse me, not 400, 100 pounds per cubic foot, and we'll say okay. And with those updated targets in here now, I'm going to go ahead and, we don't need match, so we'll go ahead and move that to other. And we will go ahead and hit exit and say yes to save, and let's rebuild the design surface model. So that's the nice thing now about Takeoff, is that I can very quickly now remake the design surface. So if I need to adjust for, again, topsoil strip, topsoil removal, or replacement, excuse me, let the software now do the work for me, and I can then regenerate very quickly updated surface models. And with this, we'll go ahead and say view, and we'll take a look now at an updated view here, and now we can start to see the adjustments for that building pad that are starting to take place. And with that design model that's now being factored in, we can now start to derive our volumes. So underneath the Takeoff menu, we will go through and say, let's calculate up our total volumes. And we don't need to update our existing ground definitions. We'll leave all that alone. And we can say, let's go ahead and report out the cut and fill depth zones. If we want to balance the cut and fill, we can. I'll just say OK. There is the area of our site. And in this case, so I have a little bit of different data from yesterday. So I've got a little slightly different volumes. But I've got all my data in here. I can go ahead and drop this into the screen and choose OK. And let's go ahead and put in the rotation angle of east, and we'll just say exit. So there's that number. Perhaps I want to do a cut fill color map. And we'll load that in there real quick, shortening areas between cut and fill. If I want to go through and display cut fill contours, labels, give you the ability to do even material quantities, for example. So if I go underneath here, let's go ahead and say, let's take a peek at maybe this quick standard report for the entire drawing. We'll choose OK. And we are running at the top of the hour here right now, so we'll have to open up for questions. Here's what we have for the perimeter of the building, the area, the amount of concrete and aggregate that we plan to put down, estimated dollar amounts based on the values that I put in, which are, who knows, I mean, the areas are obviously right, the depths are right, but whether or not my pricing is right, that's my content. So the values are certainly up to you, and you can determine what is going to be correct for your particular business. And again, put that information on the screen, choose OK, and we can go right out to here again. And then, again, one of the things that, again, people like to see is as we roll this all out is, again, this is all information that we can send out and report back out to Google Earth. So as we are, again, properly geo-referenced, we can say, let's export out a Google Earth file now, and we'll just say OK. And let's just write this out to my OTC file. And we will write out all this data. And let's get all this stuff out here too. And send it out and take a peek. So as that's writing it out, Jim, are there any questions?
One question that came up was when you were doing the elevating the polyline, you did just the back of curb. And the question was, why would you not elevate the other polylines in building your model?
I did it mainly for my case, just the sake of time. I haven't taken the time to go through the entire model in this case. The question is very valid. As I go through, and let's go ahead and say view, and let's do a thaw on all layers. There's a lot of material in here that I have not yet done. So I would want to go through and certainly elevate maybe the pan and the face of the curb, and I just have not taken the time to do everything. I've got end of year sales quotas I have to match for Carlson software, and usually I'm fielding support calls, and my phone is rather busy. So I haven't had a chance to go through and do this entire plan set. So yes, the point would be is that for normal production purposes, you'd want to take and do as much of this model as you feel comfortable. In this case, the client was really looking for just some pure earthwork volumes, and he sort of figured if we could get just the design contours compared to the original ground contours, that was going to be sufficient for what he needed, and that's what he ultimately was looking for.
Now, the other thought that went through my head is when we're setting depths for materials, we also have an option to define a curb, provided we have closed areas for the pavement, which would be another way you could get by with just doing, say, the back of curb where you're selecting the curb design, and it can take that into account.
Sure. Yeah, so it wouldn't be very difficult for me to go through and say, now, like I sort of showed with the building outline, let's go ahead and draw in that closed region for the curb area or even the parking lot area and just say, now let's just go ahead and adjust for the parking lot depths for this whole area in here and just say, now we need to account for that whole area as well. So there's lots of things that I certainly could do with this site. My lack of time and the fact that I don't have any skin in the game on this particular project sort of said I didn't need to do that, but ultimately I would. So my goal for this presentation and today was to sort of demonstrate the tools that are out there to say, here's what's available for you, and here's how you can make use of them to get your jobs done. Other questions?
No, that was the one burning question.
Okay. So there and again, it does make some very effective tools for you. So as we go through and look at what Takeoff does provide, it does have a lot of great opportunities for making short work your plan sets. And let's see, there was one other thing here that I was looking for. Let's see if I can find it real quick. And then I'll let you go because I'm sure everybody has things that they want to do on Friday afternoon rather than sit around and listen to me prattle on. Trying to find the cut fill centroids routine. I can't remember where that one was at. Is that surface tools? There it is, cut fill centroids. So the other one I really do like is this one right here underneath the surface menu for cut fill centroids. This is one I didn't talk about in yesterday's presentation. That within this region, you can have it generate the differences between cut and fill areas and have it also then report and optimize earth movement. So as you are moving material out throughout the site, it will factor in all the areas of cut versus areas of fill and figure out, for haul analysis, what you might be needing to do on the site. And it's going to go through then. I've got 3 individual regions of, cut versus fill, 1 major area of cut, 1 of fill, 2 of cut. And to get data around this site very effectively, here's what I need to do to move data from region 1 and 2 and the average haul distances for both of those. So there's my report. I'll go ahead and put that onto the screen just so I've got it. Let's move that out here, and we'll put that right there. And I'm done with that report. So that's just one more little tool that I have available for me that lets me again sort of show what I have available. So that'll wrap up today's presentation. So we do encourage you to take a look at what Takeoff and Takeoff Suite have available to you. So we do thank you for your time. And with that, enjoy the remainder of your weekend or wherever else your plans take you.
All right. And for those of you who actually joined us for all 4 sessions, I see some familiar names on our attendee list. Do appreciate you taking the time out for the last 4 days to join us. That is significant on your part, and we appreciate it. Have a great weekend, folks.